I want to speak with the chief.
Golly, bro. Is this one all over Mexico?
I like it, though.
Bring your neighbors down the road.
Oh, good luck and goodbye. Hey. Spring line, mister. Anyone move? Stop cutting down!
When it can go, always. But they go nowhere, sometimes they still live on the minute. This is really beautiful.
How beautiful you are. You are like something truly remarkable, astounding, and amazing.
Come on, bring it. I wish
The twisted, the lucky, and the tragic. Unlock the mysteries and secrets. Escape to the world of the famous and the infamous. Escape to Reels.
See? Our time's up already. Thanks for watching Reels on the Roku channels. And now it's back to our show. Bye now.
It's June 6th, 1997, and Melissa Drexler has just given birth to a baby boy in the bathroom at her senior prom. After throwing him away in the trash, Melissa joins her friends, who believe she had just been feeling ill.
Hey, are you alright? So what's wrong? Hey, talk to me. What's going on? Hey, Melissa.
Other students will report that Melissa seemed to be enjoying herself and appeared normal.
I think if someone was fully aware that they just had a catastrophic event happen in their life, they would not come out and do business as usual at the prom. I've seen people in dissociative states, and they're almost like they're hypnotic and they're doing things, but they're not fully in control of what they're doing. They're in this altered state where they're not consciously thinking, planning, organizing, although they may appear to be on some limited level. They're not doing it with the full moral, conscious, ethical awareness that we have when we're fully alert.
Meanwhile, students alert prom supervisors that there is blood in a restroom stall. A janitor is sent in with a mop.
Blood is really an odd substance. So it doesn't even require a lot of blood for people to presume the amount is massive. If you take just a couple tablespoons of blood and spread it around, it will look to the average person like there's been a massacre.
The janitorial staff notices that the trash bag feels too heavy to contain only paper towels, so they decide to check its contents. Inside, they find the tiny body of Melissa's newborn. Inside the banquet hall, Melissa enjoys a salad, reportedly carrying on as if nothing has happened.
You were really out of there for a minute. Someone probably spiked the punch.
Oh, someone definitely spiked the punch.
Right. Want to go dance? Come on.
Yeah.
After the baby was disposed of, the young woman went out to dance. I think that's probably what bothered a lot of people later.
How could she have walked back out onto the dance floor and just resumed her prom as if nothing had happened?
She delivers the baby in the restroom where the prom is taking place, and then returns to the prom and dances with her boyfriend, requests a specific song.
Hey, I'll be right back.
Where is she going?
I don't know.
Melissa allegedly asked the DJ to play the song The Unforgiven by Metallica.
Meanwhile, witnesses share information with prom supervisors about the source of the blood in the bathroom.
Mostly young girls who were in the ladies' room. Every one of them immediately ID'd Miss Drexler as the person that was using a particular stall. They saw her foot going back and forth on the floor. The stall was a mess with blood and afterbirth and things like that.
Concerned about bleeding and unaware of the cause, a concerned supervisor checks on Melissa.
Excuse me. Dear, I need to speak with you. Are you feeling okay? You looked a pretty big mess in the bathroom.
Sorry. I have a really heavy period.
Paramedics rushed in and they tried to revive the baby by performing CPR.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again.
For nearly 2 hours, paramedics tried to revive Melissa Drexler's baby.
The chances are almost zero for revival in these cases. If they've been strangled, suffocated, drowned, the likelihood of recovery is pretty much zero.
Melissa's newborn baby boy is dead.
While Melissa is escorted to the hospital for treatment, her boyfriend John discovers the horrific news.
Did you know your girlfriend was pregnant? I think Melissa's been hiding a horrible, horrible secret from you. She said she felt sick. That's all. No, John. She had a baby tonight in the bathroom. Is Melissa okay? Is the baby okay? Yeah. I want to see one of the scores, Melissa. No, John. She's not here. She had to go to the hospital.
While Melissa was being treated, authorities called her parents, and they had no idea she was even pregnant.
What? No, that's ridiculous. My daughter is not pregnant. You must have the wrong girl, and Melissa would never. Yes. Yes, we can go to the hospital to clear this up right now. They think she's pregnant.
What? How's that? How can that be?
I don't know. Someone from the school said something about her and a baby at prom, and we have to go to the hospital to clear this up. It's ridiculous.
As Melissa is released from the hospital, an autopsy is underway on her baby boy.
They wanted to determine whether the baby was stillborn or whether there was a live birth and a death.
Will the autopsy reveal that the baby was born deceased, or that he was alive and that his mother murdered her newborn son?
One of the greatest stars in the history of Hollywood is gone.
She was a very heavy drinker.
This autopsy tells me more about how he lived than how he died.
The fans had no idea what was going on behind the scenes.
But she definitely had an amazing life.
Autopsy on Beatles.
Oh, welcome back. Beat off the coffee table, please. Hey, you know, Reels is where you'll always find real lives, real stories, and real celebrities. But did you also know it's a real oasis, if you will? Just watch.
Escape. Travel to other lives and other minds. The mystifying and the complex. The beautiful and the twisted. The lucky and the tragic. Unlock their mysteries and secrets. Escape to the world of the famous and the infamous. Escape to reels.
See? Our time's up already. Thanks for watching Reels on the Roku channels. And now it's back to our show. Bye now.
Melissa Drexler's baby is found dead in the trash at her senior prom. What everyone wants to know is, was he alive when he came into the world, making Melissa a cold-blooded killer? Authorities come to a conclusion. The autopsy shows that the baby was indeed born alive, strangled, and then suffocated.
If the baby were alive, born alive, depending upon how the death was caused, then you have a criminal issue.
A birth certificate was issued and a death certificate. If it had been a stillborn, there would have just been a death certificate. The Drexler family named the baby boy Christopher, and they had a private burial.
When word got out that a baby had been born and killed at the prom, the other students were shocked and sad. Some of them even wore white ribbons to memorialize the baby.
Some students are more callous, however. High school staff are presumably concerned about the negative attention the school is receiving.
How could she conceal this from the boyfriend? From her own mother. Slow down.
Some people are such good liars, they convince themselves.
This is going to ruin our school. This is not who we are.
On June 24th, 1997, 18 days after Melissa Drexler kills her baby, she is charged with murder.
Well, the key thing in every criminal case is determining the criminal intent of the defendant. And if the state can prove criminal intent, as a defense attorney, you got to figure out, can you keep your client out of jail? If you can't keep your client out of jail, how do you limit the client's exposure to jail?
Melissa's attorneys argue before a judge that she didn't know what she was doing when she was giving birth.
It was what we call a dissociative disorder, that young ladies that go through this process disassociate themselves from reality and don't believe that there's going to be a birth. That was the psychological aspect of it. The mitigating factors here obviously were her age, the fact that she had no prior record, the fact that there was psychological defense all weighed in her favor. Against her was the fact that there was a dead baby.
That's when Melissa Drexler became known as the prom mom, and the media attention kicked into high gear.
Melissa is released from jail on a $50,000 bond. She returns home, where journalists are camped out in front of the family's house.
There was no press conference, and there was no word from Melissa Drexler.
I think that the media attention, which was over the top in a lot of ways, woke up a lot of people.
More than a year after the death of her baby, Melissa Drexler agrees to a plea deal, aggravated manslaughter instead of murder, with a maximum sentence of 15 years.
I knew I was pregnant. I concealed the pregnancy from everyone. I went to the prom, I went into the bathroom and delivered the baby.
When Melissa read her statement in court, she was very quiet and barely audible.
I then took trash bags and covered it around the baby and put the baby in a trash can. I was aware of what I was doing, when I placed the baby in the trash.
She was extraordinarily remorseful, and it did get a positive response from both the prosecutor and the judge. I recall the judge saying at the time that he had compassion for what happened here, that Miss Drexler was not a monster.
We still put her in jail. There had to be a punishment, I think. And I don't know how she feels about it, but my conscience is clear on it.
She got a 15-year sentence, which at the time was probably the harshest sentence that had been given out certainly in decades in this country for a neonaticide death.
In prison, Melissa takes fashion classes and continues to pursue her interest in design.
Very good. Very good.
In November of 2001, Melissa is released from prison after serving only 3 years of her 15-year sentence.
When Melissa was released from prison, she didn't give any media interviews, but her father was quoted as saying that she wanted to get on with her life. It's not surprising that she doesn't give interviews about this. This isn't anything that anybody wants to be famous for. This is something that now, 20 years later, she's probably still dealing with every day. This will always be part of who she is. It will always be part of her story.
This case and others like it raise the issue of teenage pregnancy and support for these young women when they're willing to choose adoption.
There are so many people who want healthy babies. A lot of times people are trying to get pregnant later in life and then it's not happening for them. And the process of adoption is very difficult. So a healthy teenage pregnancy that isn't wanted by that teen or that teen's family is something that could bring immense joy to a different family.
We have to do more than just look at shame and blame to try to control behavior. We have to look at positive motivation. You are the authority of your life. And a person always needs to remember that and assert it.
Every woman who undergoes an unwanted pregnancy, I'm sure, is psychologically burdened, perhaps for the rest of their lives.
The state will never be able to punish these girls the way they punish themselves. There's an emphasis on the baby as the victim. I will argue that the girls themselves are victims as well. They, in my experience, always punish themselves. They never really let it go.
Yeah. Is that your mom? Yeah. Your mom was a good cook. I think your mom's a lot better cook than me. A lot of things I cook, I don't. Her baby, her children. I think. I'm not throwing out everybody's board. I went to your house a few times. Well, at least once. What's wrong with the big one? Had a couple big old bowls. Hey, Anchor. Going tonight. Our extra break yet?
was a stunning blonde that no man could resist. You either wanted to have sex with her or take care of her or both. He was a grifter who managed to con his way into her heart.
He's basically just a small-time hustler.
Stardom finds a small-town girl thanks to Hugh Hefner and Playboy magazine. This wasn't just a Playboy model. She was comfortable in films and television, but her rising fame is complicated by a shocking love triangle involving Stratton, her husband, and an A-list Hollywood director.
She had started dating Peter, and I knew that she was still married to Paul.
All leading to two bodies found under suspicious circumstances.
The crime scene was bloody. The 12-gauge shotgun at close range does create a lot of carnage.
And it's up to a determined detective to separate the truth from the drama.
There was just no physical evidence there to collect as far as fingerprints.
Who killed Playboy centerfold Dorothy Stratton? On a beautiful summer afternoon, Patty Lerman is roller skating on California's Venice Beach. She's trying to reach her friend and housemate, Paul Snyder.
Paul told me that he was going to meet me later to call, make sure, because he wanted to go roller skating. But nobody answered the phone.
Patty tries for hours. She talks to a friend who's also trying to reach Paul. He's worried and tells Patty to go home right away.
Something's not right. You need to go in there. I've been trying to call. Paul's not answering his phone. You need to go in there and find out what's going on. I went in the house and went down the hallway and knocked on the door and nobody answered. And knocked again and opened the door. Saw Paul's body laying on the floor. And then you saw Dorothy's body laying on the bed. I was in shock. Yeah, it was horrible.
Homicide detective Richard DeAnda, a 12-year veteran of the LAPD, is one of the first investigators to arrive at the home Patty and Paul share, 10881 Clarkson Road in West Los Angeles.
When I pulled up to the scene, it was secure. There were black and whites and uniformed officers. They had cordoned off with tape the entrance to the house. Off of the living area towards the rear of the house, that's where the victims were. There was a male and female. They're both nude and obviously deceased.
No wallet, no nothing. Captain Glenn Ackerman has been assigned the case with Richard DeAnda. Ackerman has worked homicide with the LAPD for 7 years.
We don't know who this guy is.
Detectives start by examining the victims.
His condition was obviously deceased. He had a massive head wound. Like the whole top of his head was gone.
Dorothy was laying off the side of the bed and she had seen the shot coming, so her fingers had been blown off on either side of the rim.
As if she was raising her hand to say, don't.
Next, the detectives notice an unusual padded bench. It's designed for sex.
Specifically designed to permit the restraint of someone for intercourse.
And something on it catches Detective DeAnda's eye.
On the apparatus, there's medical tape. Obviously, somebody was strapped to it, and in closer examination, I can see that there's blonde hairs on the tapes.
The detectives learn from uniform officers at the scene that the victims are a high-profile couple.
I was told who they were, that it was Dorothy Stratton, that she was the Playmate of the Year. She's there with her husband by the name of Paul Snyder.
Somebody called you Hefner. Somebody murdered his Playmate of the Year.
Even by Hollywood standards, Dorothy Stratton's rise to fame is swift. The male victim, Paul Snyder, made Dorothy Stratton a household name.
Paul Snyder discovered Dorothy when she was working in a Dairy Queen in Vancouver.
In 1977, 17-year-old Dorothy Stratton goes by the name Dorothy Hoog Stratton. When Paul Snyder meets Dorothy, he knows she's his ticket to the big time.
He was charming her, he was wooing her, and he said, I have aspirations for you. I think you could be rich and famous. I think we should take some pictures of you. And sent them to Playboy, and Playboy got them. And Hugh Hefner flew Dorothy and Paul in from Vancouver.
Former Playmate Roseanne Catton Walton meets the pretty teenager the day she arrives in the United States.
She seemed very, very young, very scared. She was in Los Angeles, and she was in the office of Playboy.
Playboy founder Hugh Hefner sees talent in the fresh-faced blonde, and Dorothy Hoog Stratton is reborn as Dorothy Stratton.
Dorothy was the whole package. She was a knockout. She was beautiful. And she was really good for Hugh Hefner and the Playboy company because it put a friendly face on the models. You're looking at a still image, and however you feel about that sort of thing, it has no personality behind it. You're looking at a beautiful woman with no clothes on. Well, Dorothy could take it off the page. He did make her Playmate of the Month in April of 1979. And she was chosen for Playmate of the Year in 1980.
Hefner always wanted a playmate that could cross over into the film industry.
This wasn't just a Playboy model. She was comfortable in films and television. They could go places with her.
Dorothy is on her way to becoming a Hollywood star. Dorothy's lover, Paul, appoints himself as her manager. He has ambitions of his own.
He's going to create this Dorothy Stratton creature that's going to be so famous, and he's going to be on top of the world with her.
He wanted to be a big guy. He was an alpha male.
But being Dorothy's boyfriend and manager is not enough. Paul proposes, and he and Dorothy elope in Las Vegas.
She said, oh, I just married Paul. And I was like, what? She said, well, he's done so much for me.
Now, 20-year-old Dorothy Stratton and 29-year-old Paul Snyder are dead. With no witnesses to the crime, Detective DeAnda tries to understand what happened.
You kind of take a stand back and you look at it and try to determine, okay, where's evidence, what is evidence, and what actually happened here. You have two dead bodies there, and it appears that...
Come on, Mr. Beagle.
The detectives wonder, if a thief shot this young married couple, was this a robbery gone horribly wrong?
There was some jewelry, I don't recall how much. She had $1,000 in the purse in cash.
And there were just items that would have obviously been taken had the motive been to rob them.
So that pretty much eliminated robbery at this point.
So Detective DeAnda looks to the victims for clues.
Both bodies had head wounds. It is apparent that it's a shotgun, a 12-gauge shotgun.
Come on, Mr. Beagle, come on.
That's consistent with the shells that are on the floor.
Come on, Mr. Beagle. Oh, there he is.
Initially, at first glance, you could not see the weapon, which was concerning.
Detective DeAnda knows from experience, that finding the murder weapon is key to finding the killer.
You guys haven't found anything?
Nothing.
The male is face down on the carpet. As we move closer to the male, lo and behold, there's the gun. He was laying on top of the shotgun.
Now Ackerman wonders if Paul shot Dorothy, then turned the gun on himself.
It had all the earmarks of murder-suicide. We didn't jump to a conclusion, but that was our first impression.
Ackerman looks for more evidence of murder-suicide, but something seems strange. If Paul shot himself, how did he land on the gun?
I mean, naturally, when you think about someone taking a shotgun to themselves, if they were to shoot themselves, they would be propelled in the opposite direction. And that's why this was so unusual, because he landed on the gun.
Detective DeAnda looks for fingerprints to confirm Paul Snyder fired the weapon.
There was blood all over the floor and all over his hands. And there was just no physical evidence there to collect as far as fingerprints because they were obliterated with the blood.
And for a suicide, there's another vital piece of evidence missing.
It looks like it might be murder-suicide. We went to look for a suicide note. Couldn't find one anywhere.
Detectives Ackerman and DeAnda can't prove Paul Snyder pulled the trigger.
Have you talked to the lady downstairs yet, Patty?
Patty Lerman tells DeAnda that Paul is not capable of murder.
I just know Paul would not kill someone. He loved Dorothy.
Earlier that day, before I left to go roller skating, Paul was really in a good mood. I don't think Paul killed Dorothy. He really loved her. I think there was a third person.
It seemed like somebody else may have had something to do with this.
Patty Lerman also gives Detective DeAnda his first clue. She tells him Dorothy has been having an affair with a Hollywood heavyweight.
She was sleeping with Peter Bogdanovich.
In 1980, Peter Bogdanovich is one of the most celebrated film directors in Hollywood.
She had started dating Peter, and I knew that she was still married to Paul. I mean, something bad was going to happen.
With two bodies and a crime scene that offers up little evidence, Detectives Ackerman and DeAnda follow up on Patty Lerman's lead. They're about to uncover one of the most tragic love triangles in Hollywood history.
Hey now, don't touch your remote. We'll be right back to your program in a couple of minutes.
Hey, thanks for watching Reels here on the Roku channels. You know, a lot of people would just start channel surfing right now, but not you. You can take this moment to pause, reflect, to think about what's for dinner tonight. Breathe in, breathe out, order out. Now here's something I think you'll really enjoy.
One of the greatest stars in the history of Hollywood is gone.
She was a very heavy drinker.
This autopsy tells me more about how he lived than how he died.
The fans had no idea what was going on behind the scenes.
But she definitely had an amazing life.
Autopsy on Reels.
Oh, welcome back. Feet off the coffee table, please. Hey, you know, Reels is where you'll always find real lives, real stories, and real celebrities. But did you also know it's a real oasis, if you will? Just watch.
Escape. Travel to other lives and other minds. The mystifying and the complex. The beautiful and the twisted. The lucky and the tragic. Unlock their mysteries and secrets. Escape to the world of the famous and the infamous. Escape to Reels.
See? Our time's up already. Thanks for watching Reels on the Roku channels. And now it's back to our show. Bye now.
LAPD investigators Richard DeAnda and Glenn Ackerman are on the hunt for a killer in a brutal double homicide. 20-year-old Playboy centerfold Dorothy Stratton has been found dead in a home in West Los Angeles, alongside her husband, Paul Snyder. It's a grisly crime scene. Both have been shot in the head.
The crime scene was bloody. The instrument used was a 12-gauge shotgun, and that usually does quite a bit of damage.
The detectives first think this is a murder-suicide, but Paul left no suicide note or fingerprints on the murder weapon. The couple's housemate, Patty Lerman, tells the detectives Paul is no killer.
I couldn't even imagine Paul shooting Dorothy, and then shooting himself. I just felt like possibly there could have been somebody else that came in and did that.
Patty Lerman also reveals that Dorothy is having an affair with a Hollywood icon.
She was sleeping with Peter Bogdanovich.
I found there was another person by the name of Peter Bogdanovich romantically involved, and so it was basically a love triangle.
The love triangle is always significant in murder investigation because one of the participants may be jealous, envious, and these emotions can lead to murder.
The detectives wonder if Peter Bogdanovich killed Dorothy and Paul. They set out to learn more about the adulterous affair. Playmate Roseanne Catton Walden is at the Playboy Mansion when Bogdanovich and Stratton first meet.
Dorothy and I were standing next to each other and talking, and he was on the other side of Dorothy, and I saw he was looking at her.
Well, most people who met Dorothy Stratton were smitten with her. It was one of those sort of Marilyn Monroe things. You either wanted to have sex with her or take care of her, or both. Bogdanovich spent a lot of time at the Playboy Mansion, so he knew his way around women. And Dorothy didn't respond to him like a lot of women would. So Bogdanovich at the Playboy Mansion sees Dorothy and does a, hey, I could put you in one of my movies. Here's my number. Call me. She's like, yeah, sure, I'll call you. And does it. But I think that surprised him about her.
Dorothy has unknowingly caught the eye of one of the most famous film directors of our time. Like Playmate Dorothy Stratton, Peter Bogdanovich's rise is meteoric. Within 4 years of moving to Hollywood, he goes from mild-mannered movie historian to celebrity film director.
Peter Bogdanovich had several hit movies under his belt with The Last Picture Show and with Paper Moon.
The Last Picture Show, starring Sybil Shepherd, garners 8 Academy Award nominations and catapults Bogdanovich to stardom. But Bogdanovich is more than just a star director. He's a hopeless romantic who falls for his starlets, including 21-year-old Sybil Shepherd.
And he left his wife for her. He divorced his wife to be with Sybil Shepherd.
When Sybil Shepherd leaves him, 40-year-old Bogdanovich finds a new muse.
Peter Bogdanovich's persistence eventually got Dorothy to the point where she was going to work with him.
He cast 20-year-old playmate Dorothy Stratton in his new film, They All Laughed, and whisks Dorothy off for 5 weeks of filming in New York. But the set is closed to Dorothy's husband, Paul. He's forced to stay behind in Los Angeles.
When you're in a film set or when you're in a film crew, you sort of develop an intimacy while you're together.
The detectives learn it's not long before Dorothy moves into Bogdanovich's hotel suite.
I was on set when Dorothy was filming with Peter in New York, and that was when I found out that she had started dating Peter.
But for Peter Bogdanovich, the relationship is more than a set romance. He's fallen hard for the gorgeous blonde.
I think he was kind of stunned by how quickly he became really attached to her.
With Dorothy so far away, Paul tries to stay connected by phone, but she can't be reached.
Yes. Yes, it's Paul Snyder calling.
He would try to call and he could not get through. They would say, I'm sorry, she's not taking any calls, or that line's, do not disturb on there.
I mean, Peter Bogdanovich had sort of a, I don't know, control issue. I don't know if that's quite the term to use, but if anyone wanted to get through Dorothy, they had to go through him.
He's the one, I think, that put the block on the phone and no information on where she was or what was going on with her.
I think that Bogdanovich became obsessed with Dorothy.
When filming ends, Bogdanovich makes it clear he wants Dorothy for himself.
Peter told Dorothy if they are going to pursue a relationship together, she has to leave Paul.
But the love triangle continues. Detectives Deanda and Ackerman wonder if Bogdanovich found Dorothy and Paul together, killing them in a jealous rage.
When the detectives were investigating the murders, they had to go to Peter Bogdanovich and find out where he was. It's just the way things are.
The individual who's involved in the love triangle and one of the individuals in that triangle ends up deceased, you have to look at them as a potential suspect. They're definitely a person of interest. When I spoke with Peter Bogdanovich at his home, he was distraught with the death of Dorothy.
Where were you?
Peter Bogdanovich was at home that day and spent the day in his house in Bel Air. And there were other people there at his home who managed the estate.
Peter had an airtight alibi. There was no questioning the fact that he could not have been there.
With their best suspect eliminated, the detectives feel the heat from the media as reporters demand answers about the death of the beautiful blonde.
I had people from the London Times and from far away as Moscow show up to interview me about this particular crime.
You have media attention, which really becomes a major issue in any type of high-profile case. They're constantly wanting updated information. They're constantly wanting to insert their own ideas and their own information. So it takes you away from the investigation.
Deanda stays focused on the case and wonders if Peter didn't kill Paul and Dorothy, who did? He looks closer at Dorothy's husband, Paul Snyder, and what he discovers is shocking.
I obviously did a deep dive into his background.
He was dealing with people that were involved in drugs and prostitution. He was in business with dangerous people. He dealt with danger.
Deanda now wonders if a shady deal gone wrong ended in murder. As detectives take their investigation into LA's criminal underworld.
One of the greatest stars in the history of Hollywood is gone.
She was a very heavy drinker.
This autopsy tells me more about how he lived than how he died.
The fans had no idea what was going on behind the scenes.
But
she definitely had an amazing life.
Autopsy on Wheels.
Oh, welcome back. Feet off the coffee table, please. Hey, you know, Reels is where you'll always find real lives, real stories, and real celebrities. But did you also know it's a real oasis, if you will? Just watch.
Escape. Travel to other lives and other minds. The mystifying and the complex. The beautiful and the twisted. The lucky and the tragic. Unlock their mysteries and secrets. Escape to the world of the famous and the infamous. Escape to Reels.
See? Our time's up already. Thanks for watching Reels on the Roku channels. And now it's back to our show. Bye now.
All eyes are on LAPD homicide investigators Richard Deanda and Glenn Ackerman as they work a high-profile case. Playmate of the Year Dorothy Stratton has been found dead in a West LA home, lying nude next to her husband, Paul Snyder. Both have been shot. Stratton's murder hits her fellow playmates hard.
Everyone was just devastated. She was just really lovely, had a very gentle quality about her.
Deanda and Ackerman have ruled out Dorothy's lover, Hollywood director Peter Bogdanovich, as a suspect.
Peter Bogdanovich was at home that day and they spent the day in his house in Bel Air.
Deanda wonders if one of Paul Snyder's shady business associates had a motive for murder. Paul Snyder is from Vancouver, so Deanda gets in touch with Canadian police.
Snyder did not have a formal criminal record, but I talked to people that knew what he was doing, and he was committing crimes. He was just a local Canadian low-life punk that he was just into everything he could to make a dollar.
And for a man who doesn't have much money, Paul Snyder sees himself as a high roller.
Snyder was a flashy guy with tight jeans and fur collars and gold rings and gold necklaces.
But Paul is running out of money.
He didn't even have a green card. He couldn't work legally in the United States.
Dorothy's modest Playboy income helps to support Paul in the U.S. But to make ends meet, he does business with dangerous people in the LA underworld.
Snyder, almost by definition, was a dodgy individual, and thus people that did business with him were equally as questionable.
Paul goes into business with Zillman Steve Banerjee, a nightclub owner who's a criminal and known to be ruthless.
Steve Banerjee was well known to be a very brutal boss.
Banerjee did have a record. He hung around with a real tough crowd, and he was just a really tough individual.
If you were competing with his club, he would try to burn down your club. If you were competing with him as a businessman or were a partner and taking his money, he would have you murdered.
Detective Deanda wonders if a bad business deal drove Steve Banerjee to kill Snyder and Dorothy. Steve Banerjee is dangerous, but he also owns a wildly popular nightclub. It features male strippers who take it all off for women. The club is Chippendales.
Banerjee claimed he saw a male strip show, and that gave him the idea that he would make it higher class.
But Paul claims Chippendales was his idea.
The Chippendales dancers wore white cuffs and bow ties. The idea probably came in one of the brainstorming sessions that Steve Banerjee held with Paul Snyder.
Paul told me that he came up with the idea of the male exotic dancers, but then in the long run, he got screwed out of the whole deal. They did Chippendales without him.
Paul has no stake in the business, but he acts like he owns it.
So Paul spent a lot of time at Chippendales and sort of like the king of the roost there and strutting around like this was his thing.
You're shady for my club. Really?
Paul's cocky attitude makes Steve Banerjee angry.
Steve Banerjee never wanted to share the limelight or the credit for his creation with anyone.
To make good with Banerjee, Paul Snyder pitches him a new idea.
Snyder always had a new idea, you know, be it a wet t-shirt contest or a wet jockey shorts contest.
Paul sells Steve Banerjee on a female mud wrestling act for Chippendales to attract male clients to the club in the afternoon. He tells Banerjee it's a sure winner.
Just like that? Oh, I'm not ready yet. That's gonna be good.
The detectives learn Paul's show is not the big moneymaker he promised Banerjee.
I told you I could do one try. One try. So it worked out.
Paul Snyder's female mud wrestling show did very poorly. It just didn't fit with the Chippendales image, which was very high class. And Steve Banerjee terminated the contract